What do you make of this trade war that is sending the markets in a complete tailspin earlier this week?
Well, good to be with you, and great to be at SALT. Look, my view is that the market is overreacting to what Trump has been saying over the last week or so. Look, Trump is not a conventional Republican when it comes to trade, that's for sure. But he does want to get a trade deal done, and certainly almost all the economists over at the White House want to get something done. And so I do think a lot of this talk about tariffs over the last week has been a bit of brinksmanship, frankly. And I'm not saying that come Friday that Trump might not move forward with those tariffs. What I am saying is that even if that happens, I believe it will be temporary. I think I would put the odds at almost 2 out of 3 that there is going to be a trade deal at some point this year, and that it will be good for the United States, it will be good for China. China will make concessions, and I think that will have a giant impact on the economy. I mean, if I'm right about this, then we're talking about a giant positive impact on the economy and growth. I'll just show you one chart on this that has to do with trade that I think you might find interesting. Let me just go forward.
It's interesting. I mean, we saw the Dow and the S&P drop 2% on Monday and Tuesday, rebounding a bit today because of some alleviation, right, that a trade deal, or at least talks, are going to happen in D.C. come Thursday and Friday.
Right. And so can you go back one on the slides? I went one too far. Okay. So, on trade, I mean, I think this is an important point to understand what Trump is doing. I remember when Larry Kudlow and I first started talking with Trump 4 years ago about this, and we said we were more for free trade, and he was more protectionist, and he'd always get angry. He'd say, I'm not a trade protectionist, I want free trade, but I want it to be fair trade. And he said, just start looking at the evidence, and we did. And this comes from the White House Council of Economic Advisor report from a few months ago, and you can see that Trump has a point that he said he wanted a level playing field, and there isn't a level playing field with trade. Now, certainly with countries like Canada, Mexico, I think that the NAFTA was a very positive thing. But look at China. I mean, China's tariffs are 3 times higher than ours are. That is not a level playing field. They're not playing by the rules. And by the way, most of you in this room know that the big problem with China is not the tariffs, it's their non-tariff trade barriers. So what I'm hoping for is an outcome here, and I think it's fairly likely, is you're actually going to get China to open up their market. So in other words, the irony of this whole thing is that Trump could actually prevail as a guy who actually enhanced free trade by using the billy club of tariffs to get China to behave itself. And by the way, I'll just say one last thing on this. I'm a free trade guy. I've always been a free trader. I believe free trade is one of the 4 pillars of prosperity. But China is a special case. I think Trump deserves a lot of credit for being the first president in a long, long time to see China as the adversary that they are. This is not a friendly country any longer. They're certainly not an ally or a friend. They are an adversary. In some ways, they are. If you look at the things they're doing on hacking into our computer systems, cyber security threats. If you look at their stealing our intellectual property. And this is a country that is not playing by the rules, and Trump, I think, is doing the right thing. I think the American people are behind him in terms of taking a very hard line with China. One last thing. We were talking about this green room. I think that the likely thing is, or what I've advised Trump on trade when I've talked to him about China, is get as good a trade deal as you can now. And it's not going to be a great deal. It's not going to have everything he wants for sure. But get something done where they, basically China agrees to buy more of our stuff. And then, you get reelected, because if you have a strong economy, Trump gets reelected. And then, what my advice is, in the second term, you get really tough with China. I mean, this isn't going to stop now. This trade dispute with China is going to last, years and years and years. This is the issue of our time, the struggle between China and the U.S.
So what was Trump's response when you said, get a deal done now, wait until you possibly get reelected, and then come down even harder on China?
Well, look, I think Trump actually believes there are some benefits to having a tariff on China. I mean, he actually thinks, he doesn't always think like a free trader. And look, I love Donald Trump. I think what he's done on the U.S. economy has been phenomenal. But I think he thinks of trade in a very different way. I mean, he thinks that by reducing trade, imports from China into the United States, that will somehow benefit American manufacturers and agriculture and so on. I don't agree with him on that. So he doesn't see the danger of tariffs that many of us in this room do. But I'll tell you, when you have a day like yesterday when the stock market falls by 600 points, I mean, this guy loves to follow the markets. I mean, Donald Trump is looking at the financial markets every couple hours. So, that gives him some hesitation. He understands, if the stock market crashes on him and the economy crashes, there's no way he can get reelected.
Many market watchers thought that a trade deal was priced into the market, and that's one of the reasons that we saw the market sell off earlier in the week, because it was a question as to whether or not this deal was actually going to happen. So let's say we do get a trade deal. How does that impact, in your eyes, the market and the American consumer?
It's just a gigantic plus.
In what ways?
Gigantic plus. First of all, that's the only cloud hanging over the horizon right now in terms of the economy. I mean, this is a great, great economy from a policy point of view. We did our tax cuts. We did our deregulations. We're promoting American energy. Just down the road, this is a pro-American business president. And, I haven't seen such a fertile economic environment in Washington in 30 years. And so you put on top of that a good trade deal with China that basically enhances trade between our two countries. I think it's great. And by the way, consumers would be the giant beneficiaries of this. I mean, you go into Walmart today, damn near everything you want is 99 cents, and most of the stuff is made in China. So, and by the way, consumers would be the victims, right? If we did have if we put a 25% tariff on goods coming in from China, that consumers get hit by that, no question.
Let's talk about what's next for you. Still an advisor to the president?
So what's the question?
You're still an advisor to the president?
Yes, I am. Just so everyone knows, I like women. I just don't like women's basketball. But I don't know what I'm going to do next, frankly. I just made the decision, last week that I was going to step down from the nomination for the Fed. I may, do something with Trump at the White House. I may, work on the campaign. I may just, go on with my life. I have a lot of fun with what I do right now. I can guarantee you one thing: I'm not going back to CNN.
So how often do you talk to the president these days?
I mean, every couple months. Trump likes to chat. He likes to get different opinions. So every few months, I'll get a call from him, and he likes to. What do you think? How am I doing? What do you think of my opinion on this and that? I mean, he's very. One of the things I really admire about Donald Trump is he likes to get different opinions. When you're in a meeting with Donald Trump and you're talking about trade or you're talking about infrastructure or whatever the issue is, he's going to present to you. He's going to have people around that table with differing opinions, and that's what a CEO should do. Not everybody in that room drinks the Kool-Aid, and it's one of, I think, the admirable qualities of Donald Trump. In the end of the day, he makes his own decision about these things, and I'd say he's batting about 80 or 90%. Most of the decisions he's made on the economy have been, right. And look, I totally reject this idea. The left is having a hard time explaining why, we have the best economy in 20 years when, the Washington Post, New York Times, Paul Krugman, Larry Summers, all of these people said that if Donald Trump, you remember this, if Donald Trump is elected president, he's going to cause a second Great Depression. Well, 2.5 years later, we have the best economy in 20 years. They have a hard time explaining that. The left's line is, oh, well, this is just a continuation of the Obama economy. That's a little hard, to swallow, given that almost everything we've done has been reversing Obama's policies. When I was on CNBC the other day, they asked me about this. Is this the Obama effect, this booming economy? I said, yes, it's the effect that Barack Obama is no longer president. That's why the economy is booming.
There are still 2 open seats on the Fed board.
Yep.
Who do you think the president
I'm not
nominate
going to have one
for
of
those?
them. I don't know. I love Judy Shelton. If you all know Judy Shelton, she's fantastic. She'd be better than me on the Fed. I have to say, just to step back a minute, I am disappointed about not being able to go forward with this, because I do think I could bring some fresh ideas to the Fed. And I think there's a club over there of 400 PhD economists who don't get it. I'm a big believer that the Fed's way too tight. I mean, actually, can you go back a couple of charts on this? I want to show you a chart that one, stop there.
So you think that the Fed should be lowering
rates?
Oh,
yeah. I mean, the Fed's too tight. I mean, we are in an era we have been in an era of deflation. I mean, this is the 2 rate increases, September and December, which were really bad decisions. And you can see what you're looking at is, I like to look at commodities. Commodity prices are the best lead indicator of where inflation is going. You can see the stock market fell in direct proportion to commodities. What that's telling you is the stock market, when it fell in the fourth quarter of 2018, it fell in nominal terms. It didn't fall in real terms. It fell in proportion to the decline in prices. And you can see what happened, by the way, when the December rate increase went into place. Commodity prices crashed. The stock market crashed. I was one of the people who called out the Fed and said, maybe I was a little too harsh. I said this was an act of economic malpractice. And you can see, it was very embarrassing, by the way, to Chairman Powell. I mean, he's only been in office 1 year, and he had to basically put his tail between his leg and admit that he had made a big mistake, which he did make. And by the way, since January, when they reversed course, I mean, the market's been on a boom. The commodities are starting to rise again. So those are my attitude, and I think Judy Shelton and some of the other people that Trump could put on that board is very simple. Growth does not cause inflation. Let me say that again. Growth does not cause inflation. Most of the PhD economists believe in the Phillips curve. They're Keynesians. They're completely wrong on this. And when you get a boom like we have right now and you put in place supply-side policies that stretch out the supply of goods and services, that's what happens when you cut tax rates and deregulate. Then you get more goods and services. That doesn't mean higher prices. It means lower prices. So I think I wish I could have brought that perspective to the Fed, and I wish I could have basically convinced Jerome Powell of that. And I think the evidence is pretty clear on this, that I don't know if I'd go for a 100 basis point decline in interest rates, but I certainly, the first thing I would do if I were Jerome Powell is I would cancel the December rate increase.
Now, what about fiscal policy? This is historically what you've advised the president on in the past. So are there changes that you want to see to fiscal policy?
Well, it should obviously make the tax cuts permanent, right? I mean, the tax cuts have been, when I talked to the president on Friday, I said, these tax cuts are working even better than we thought it would. Sometimes you draw a diagram on the blackboard, and it's been, just a sensational success in every regard. I mean, we're seeing record levels of investment by businesses. We're seeing wages rise, productivity rise. You're seeing a lot of capital from the rest of the world. One of the reasons the dollar has been strong is because when you cut tax rates and you make America a more pro-business place to invest in, foreigners want to invest in the United States. That has caused a demand for dollars. That's why it was so stupid for the Fed to be, when you have a big demand for dollars, you don't take dollars out of the economy, you put more dollars into the economy. So, look, the tax cut has been fantastic. I'd like to see some discipline on the spending side because we are running trillion-dollar deficits. And I'm here to tell you, neither Republicans nor Democrats, neither party wants to cut spending right now, and that's a problem.
Where would you cut spending?
I would first cut every agency by 10%, 10 or 15%. I mean, I think government is just way too fat and inefficient, and there's not an agency in government that couldn't operate with 80% of the budget they have right now. Businesses do that all the time, by the way, and businesses did that during the recession. They sucked in their stomach and got more efficient. Government never did that. There's $160 billion of fraudulent, erroneous payments in Medicare, Social Security, food stamps, EITC. We should not tolerate, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraudulent and erroneous payments. And then, on the big things, Social Security, I'm a big believer in moving towards a system of personal accounts for Social Security. So every young person, rather than sending 10% of their paycheck to Washington, every young person would have the ability to put that 10% into like a 401, like you're a young person. Think about how much better you would do over your lifetime if rather than having to send your money to the Social Security system, you could actually put it in an IRA and you could have the power of the markets. I mean, you would have several $1 million in your account by the time that you retire. We've got to get you millennials interested in this idea, because the worst investment, I see some millennials in this room, the worst investment you're going to make in your lifetime is Social Security. You're going to probably get a negative rate of return on that money.
Look, when it comes to investments, I think a lot of millennials, people in general, obviously looking at the markets, and consumers, definitely the American consumer, thinks that the benefits of the tax cut have been overshadowed or lessened because of the trade war. Do you agree with that?
Well, the trade war is negative for the economy, but it has to be fought. I mean, look, if you're going to have a trade dispute with China, if you're going to stare them down, which has to happen. I mean, look, ladies and gentlemen, this is the issue of our time. It's the U.S. and China, whether the United States over the next 20 and 30 and 50 years will be the economic superpower. It's not climate change. It's not all this. It's will the United States be the country that leads the world? I think for all sorts of reasons, it would be better for the United States to do so, and I think that will happen. But now is a good time to stop the bad behavior of China. They're engaged in such abusive practices right now, we can't take that. But I'll say this, I've always said, I think when it comes to betting on the United States or China over the next 20 years, I'm going to bet on the United States, and for one simple reason, and that is that our Chinese are smarter than their Chinese. That's a joke, folks.
All right, Stephen Moore, I'm looking at the clock and it says 0-0. We are out of time. We got to leave it there. But look, still an advisor to the president, and you're going to continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, folks.